Thank you much. And it's all about ETH development. And also this one, we added DeFi and AI agents. So we've got a pretty packed schedule. We've got the main stage here. We've got expert sessions in the boardroom. And then we've got two periods of breakouts. And the breakouts are meant to just distribute around the space. There'll be breakouts at 11:30 and then at 3. And the signs will be in the boardroom here and in the North Lounge. And there's signs, they're on the schedule and they're also on the signs for the various rooms. And the whole idea is just to go and figure out which track you want to go on. First one will start at 10:30 and that'll be Sam. Or no, you're doing expert session. So that's at 10:30 in the boardroom here. So I'm going to start with Amy, and she's going to start on tokenized assets.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ken. It's really exciting to be here. I love the House of Web3. Thank you, Graph and Edge and Node, for such a beautiful co-working space and great venues. The clicker here. Awesome. Again, Amy Kalnoki, COO and co-founder of Bitwave. If you don't know Bitwave, we're the leading digital asset accounting software. So bookkeeping, tax tracking, revenue recognition. Like I said, I'm doing an expert session later today. So if you have any questions on digital asset accounting, please do let me know. But today we're talking about the state of the industry for enterprise and financial institution adoption of digital asset and blockchain. It is an exciting time, as I'm sure you all know, really good vibes in the market, and I'm excited to dive into the macro and micro trends that are really pushing this forward. So we're seeing record highs, not just of ETH, of Bitcoin, and other digital asset options, other digital assets. And the bull market is real. So could we see Ethereum hit 5,000? This was a headline I saw just 2 days ago. It was predicting we would by the end of the month. So the macro trends that are driving this, first, it's institutional adoption. So State Street said that 69% of financial institutions will expect to allocate more to digital assets in the next 5 years, and that 60% of Fortune 500 companies are already doing a blockchain project. They are already using blockchain in some way. So it's no longer a question of if enterprises will adopt digital assets, but when. One of the main factors is we've never had more regulatory clarity than we have right now. So in the last year, we had a lot of acts, and Congress finally got their act together to pass some really clear regulations. So most notably the Genius Act, which I'll touch on a little bit later, and how that affects stablecoins. In Europe, we have MiCA, but we also have an SEC chair that said, if you read the quote here, that America's financial markets are moving on chain. You couldn't have a clearer endorsement of on-chain activity for financial institutions and financial markets than our own SEC chair saying that there's a commission-wide initiative to move on-chain. And one of the things that the SEC did, besides that wonderful quote, is, I know not everyone here is an accounting nerd and accounting fanatic, but they changed a staff accounting bulletin. So a recommendation from SAB 121, which basically, I won't get into the details, was a way that the previous administration was trying to slow digital asset adoption of financial institutions. It has to do with how much reserve currency you have and what type of assets Bitcoin and ETH and other crypto is. That was changed. And all you need to know is that this really paved the way for financial institutions, brokers, dealers, all of them, to be able to hold digital assets and custody them on behalf of clients. And the Genius Act, like I mentioned, a breakthrough, really landmark framework for stablecoins. If you're unfamiliar with it, it really just paves the way for people to be able to do one-to-one reserve-backed stablecoins. And we'll see later. I mean, it has really just made it so that we're seeing a ton of stablecoins is being issued not only here in the US, but MiCA is the European framework for that. And so the UK has a bunch of pilot programs. There are Euro-pegged stablecoins as well. There are still some points of friction. We still have some KYC and AML things to figure out. There are a few things, cross-border rules, FX, some accounting treatments still to be determined. But overall, the progress that has been made in 2025, especially on the stablecoin front, is amazing. And then in general, there's just strong market sentiment. The EFTs, I don't know if you guys remember a year or two ago, anytime like a Bitcoin EFT got announced, everyone like celebrated. And now, I mean, basically it's like Costco bulk EFTs. There's a ton of them. And it just really shows that investing in digital assets has gone mainstream. And the amount that has been moved on chain is higher than it's ever been. So those are the macro trends overall, both in the US and globally. Everything is pointing to further and further adoption. So we dive into some of the details here. DATs. DATs are the hot topic at the moment. If you don't know what a DAT is, it's just a digital asset treasury. So think of an enterprise like MicroStrategy, maybe a publicly traded company that has either been around for a long time and decided to move a big percentage of their treasury into a digital asset. So with the MicroStrategy example, they moved it into Bitcoin, but there are Solana ones, there are ETH ones, I mean, you name it. Or it's a newer company that was started from the beginning to basically just be a holding company of various different digital assets. And the reason these are exciting is it does allow some folks who are maybe not as savvy as everyone here in the room and can't buy ETH or Bitcoin directly or don't have the ability to or don't have the risk profile to be able to still be able to get exposure to the underlying digital assets and the movement of ETH. Like I said, maybe we're going to hit 5,000 by the end of the month. So get exposure to the digital assets by investing in the company without having to buy them directly. But every day we're seeing more and more DATs, and I think it's a positive sign for the overall adoption of digital assets. And then, like I mentioned, Genius Act really paved the way for enabling stablecoins. If you have been looking at any sort of digital asset news in the last few months, you will see that there are stablecoins everywhere. It seems like everyone is launching a stablecoin. And really, the reason is here in the US, we had a great framework for people and banks to be able to feel confident that they weren't taking undue regulatory risk on by issuing a stablecoin. Financial institutions and publicly traded companies do not like regulatory risk. They don't want to go down the path and then realize they're going to get in trouble with the government. And so having a really clear framework and requirements for them to be able to play the game correctly allowed so many stablecoins. So here we are in this world of like now dozens and dozens and dozens of stablecoins from both leading blockchain foundations, from stablecoin companies, and from publicly traded companies like a Walmart or an Amazon. And what do we do? And this actually reminds me of a time hundreds and hundreds of years ago here in the US. If you think back to like the early days of the US banking system, there were things called banknotes. So different individual banks in different regions all issued their own banknotes. We had the US dollar, we had that, but paper currency was not as widely used. I'm talking like Wild West days. And if you were moving from the East Coast to the West Coast and you had your money in a bank on the East Coast, you got a banknote, and it maybe or maybe not was it accepted by the bank out in California. And now the question is, will stablecoins be interoperable, or will they be siloed? So will Walmart accept an Amazon stablecoin? Will you constantly have to be changing back to a USDC? Will we see a big merging of all the different stablecoins that are issued? So will we see consolidation? Will we see interoperability? I don't know, but it's a really interesting time of how fractioned things are right now. They're on different chains. Most are backed, most are pegged to the US dollar. It makes up the vast majority of the fiat currency that is pegged to a stablecoin, but there are other ones. And it's just a really, really interesting time to see who's going to win the stablecoin race and what the market will look like even in 6 months to a year. And the volume. If you needed any more proof points other than that previous slide with all those big financial institution logos, the volume moving on stablecoin is crazy. And it is combined, it has surpassed Visa, MasterCard, things like that. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars being tokenized. Every stablecoin is basically an RWA because it's a representation of a real asset, a US dollar. And just the volume that has been moved into stablecoins is really, it is staggering. All right, AI. Let's talk about AI. AI is eating the world, right? AI is everywhere. I think we had a BuildETH last year, a year ago. Maybe some AI was mentioned. Maybe it wasn't. I know I was thinking about it a little bit, but not like I am today. AI is really changing everything, including enterprise adoption of blockchain and digital asset. And the reason is the payment rail of choice for AIs is blockchain. It just makes so much sense that an AI agent would use digital assets as their currency and use blockchain rails. And I know we have Kevin from Coinbase coming up next. He's going to talk about x402 and some of the protocols and frameworks. So I won't dive too deep into it, but the agentic transactions are on chain. Both for the fact that stablecoins and digital assets and blockchain transactions are programmable, so it just works well with agents, and that if you think about how you can fractionalize things into microtransactions, do just one Satoshi, just one little bit to pay for something. It's so much easier than trying to use fiat. Could you imagine an AI agent opening a bank account or getting a credit card, right? Or spending money on behalf of a company? It doesn't work in the fiat world, and it works so well. So blockchain is definitely fueling the AI revolution and vice versa. It just is the rail that makes the most sense. So RWAs alive and well. I think this is one of the things, for me, it's like the year of RWAs. We have been talking about RWAs for years, and I feel like it's kind of coming to fruition right now. RWAs are having their moments. So stocks are moving on chain. We've seen things like NASDAQ off, say, 24/5 trading, but we have 24/7 trading of stocks that have been tokenized. You see some of these big names up here, Robinhood, TradeWeb, are just moving their assets on chain to allow really high volume and 24/7 trading of tokenized assets. We're seeing lending on chain. We're seeing repos and intraday lending. And basically across the board, the way traditional Wall Street is getting into blockchain is through RWAs, and it's happening in 2025. It's been talked about for years, but again, right now we're seeing people getting competitive advantages by opening up their trading to blockchain world. So really exciting time for RWAs. And the last thing I really want to touch on that is driving overall positive market sentiment is the crop of IPOs that we've seen recently. There were years without any sort of blockchain related IPOs. Previous administration was not friendly to it. Now, in just the last year, we've seen significant IPO increase. So Circle had a very successful IPO. Bullish Figure more recently both IPO'd, and Bitco has filed for their IPO. We expect to see that one do as well as the other one. Very hopeful for them. I don't know if there are any Bitco people here, but congratulations on that. And besides the IPOs, we've seen a bunch of M&As. About a year ago, Stripe made big headlines, not just in the digital asset space, but more broadly in the market when they acquired Bridge for like over $1 billion. And I think that really woke up a lot of people outside of the space and say, hey, this is for real. We see after that, they acquired Privy. Ripple acquired Rail. Coinbase has bought a bunch of companies. And it just shows that these large players in the space are trying to bolster their own abilities in the blockchain and digital asset capabilities that their company has so that they aren't left behind. So the number of successful IPOs and the number of high profile acquisitions really just it just shows how how much this has gone mainstream and how adoption has really hit, in my opinion, its peak and will continue, I predict, for the rest of 2025. All right, that is mine. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, of course.
I noticed that the risk would be about custody when it comes to AI transactions. Uh, for example, I went to the tech conferences, like Tech Week's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
And I did a few vibe coding hackathons, and people have been mentioning how AI is this perfect thing for prototyping your ideas to a certain level, and even for transactions, it has some level. But how do we, when it comes to the risk assessment of malicious side of things, like AI can sometimes go off the rails. How do we safeguard against that possibility that transactions are concerned that just be handled by AI?
Yeah, I'm not. Anyone can be an AI developer these days with vibe coding. So I'm certainly not like an AI programmer, but from a compliance perspective, I would recommend having really clear parameters on your wallets and having individual wallets for different AI projects and funding those with just a constrained amounts. So let's say you have an AI project and you want it to be able to spend some of your ETH and you vibe code that up. I mean, I would just have one spin up a wallet specifically tied to that individual project. That helps from an accounting perspective too. We always recommend something at Bitwave called wallet hygiene, and it's having different wallets for different purposes. It helps with the accounting on the other end. So you can say, well, all that ETH that I put in that wallet that I let my AI agent spend, that was all developer costs. As a business, I can write that off. That was part of doing business. It was research, it was R&D. But if you have just one big omnibus wallet with all of your crypto in there and you give an AI agent access to that, I think that's where you could have some of your compliance and perhaps, issues. So having a very specific wallet for a specific task, I think will help with the risk profile there. Yes, you're welcome. Yeah.
Saw in your research or as an accountant, if raw data and IP is sent from RWAs, specifically with the announcement of Google's A2P and A2A economy, data supposedly in the future will be the gold of the future.
Yeah.
Do you see that also starting to become RWAs?
I mean, I think you can tokenize anything with value as an RWA. So anything that can be traded, anything that can be bought and sold could be tokenized and represented on chain. So any sort of IP, NFTs are a little bit dead, but NFTs were, if it was an art piece that was included, so like that painting over there is something that's real, and you could do a digital representation of that and buy and sell. So I would think that data would function the same way. So if it's something that has value that someone's willing to pay for, like access to a data set, then yeah, it could be tokenized. It could be brought on chain and you could sell it, trade it, and own it. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, KYC and AML are obviously super important here in the US. Everyone wants to stay on the correct side of the law. So knowing who your counterparty is as best you can, it is a huge challenge on chain because people want to have privacy. They want to maybe anonymize their wallet, and so it is an important step. But I think that having your counterparty known is something that people are getting more and more comfortable in the blockchain space because it really is a requirement for these large institutions. They have to follow AML and KYC laws because they get big dollar fines when they don't. And so it's actually a challenge that I think the industry is adopting to meet the standard of existing financial institutions. Yeah. All right, we're at 10:30. Yeah, one more question. Go for it. You're totally fine.
Capability.
Uh-huh.
As we're on the electric system and the
Right.
through costs of AI or Web3 in the past,
Yeah.
quite energy intensive. Like I think Saudi Arabia just said they're not allowing it anymore. For Bitcoin mining and that. So
Yeah.
are we moving in a better direction?
Well, I mean, I think it's telling that all these large corporations like the Googles of the world are buying their own data centers and talking about their own nuclear power plants, right? Like, I think that is really telling on the volume of energy that's required. But I've seen that the industry has adopted in the past and changed, like when Bitcoin moved from proof of work to proof of stake. So ETH has always been a proof of stake blockchain, but moved to a proof of work. It was specifically to address environmental concerns. So I think as an industry, blockchain foundations are aware of it and open to adapting to be more energy efficient. Yeah. All right. 10:30. Ken? Of course. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a treat here. The next talk is on x402 from Kevin Leffew, who's one of the co-creators, I believe. This is really cool stuff. And then we've also got an expert session on finance and accounting from Sam at Overland Blockchain Group, which finance and accounting, awesome stuff they're doing. So they'll be in the boardroom. And then Kevin will be here talking about x402 and really cool stuff.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for organizing. I'm going to take a second here to make sure we get this presentation live. It's none of those. I'm going to get my laptop. Well, I'm going to get my laptop really quick. We'll plug in and we'll walk through an overview of X402 today. I'm going to get involved here, walk around with the crowd while we're moving. So who's excited today? Let's go. Beautiful day in San Francisco. Couldn't be a more beautiful venue. I mean, look at the Presidio behind us. It's pretty awesome. Able to click here. It's USB-C. So who's here from out of town? Show of hands. Anyone coming in? Awesome. Welcome to the city. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. I've been in crypto for a while. Started my career as a co-author of the StoreJ white paper. You may remember that from way back in the day. And I'm here today to talk about X402. So has anyone here heard of X402? All right. Yeah, we had a great event last night where we got the open source community behind this standard together. And today I'll talk about X402, the design goals for the protocol, some of our partners in the AI space, what we're setting out to do and how you can get involved. I have a little slot for a demo. I don't think I'll give a demo today, but there's a bunch online that you can see as well. So X402, discover, pay autonomously. That's the goal of X402. What we want to do is we want to enable agents to access external tools without the human loop friction of tool use configuration or MCP configuration. You may have worked with language models in the past, like ChatGPT, Claude, Grok. There's tons of them. And we know from experience, for those of us that have used it, that language models that have access to external tools are better aligned from a task perspective than agents who are simply accessing their internal model data. So once we give the agent the ability to do web search or to pull data from the web, it's more powerful because now it has more context. And in the language model space, context is king. And that's the kind of the quick overview of X402. So I have a clicker here, right? Cool. So we'll keep it informal. So again, this is the problem statement. We know that with today's tooling, agents can't easily pay for external data and services. Okay, so a language model can write code. That's awesome. But I want my language model to also deploy that code to the cloud. I want it to access a inference API for GPU resources, for image generation, or for language model generation. And there's no standard way for agents to really pay for services today. And part of our thesis is that language models don't have the same baggage that human beings have when it comes to payment. Language models don't care whether they're paying with a credit card or stablecoin. They'll use their reasoning capabilities to use the lowest cost mechanism in order to achieve their task, which in this case tends to be stablecoins rather than credit cards. And Agents need all kinds of things. They need API resources. They need to like write code, deploy it to the cloud. They need to maybe pull social context data from Farcaster. We have Nanar, which is a Farcaster API supported on x402. They might need to pull financial or scientific research data. And maybe the people that are hosting that data want to charge for it. The economics of the internet are changing quickly with the rise of AI. Companies like Cloudflare, Google, Vercel, and others are all recognizing this. Any data that's publicly available on the internet is going to be ingested by a language model. And so we need to find ways to monetize IP advantages, and x402 solves for that. And really kind of the big idea is, what if stablecoins became the native payment layer for web resources, for AI, for agents? And that's what we've set out to do. We know that intent is really the new interface. And I have a 6-month-old son. I expect the way that he interacts with computers to be vastly different than the way that I grew up interacting with computers. I think in the future, the operating system will become intent-based. And we're already seeing the early indications of that, where we're moving from a world where we're browsing shopping carts on Amazon, and instead we're saying, okay, like ChatGPT, you have memory on me, you know my context, I want you to find the best fitting shirt for me. And agents use their reasoning capabilities in conjunction with their memory of you to align task outcomes and to surface things that you can purchase. So this is a consumer example. x402 is a little bit more focused on cloud resources and API servers, but overall arcing goal, intent is the new interface. And language models have already disrupted consumer discovery. Now they're coming for payments. You may have seen ACP, which is a consumer purchasing standard from Stripe, announced last week, built into ChatGPT. x402 runs on MCP primarily today. So you can connect it with ChatGPT, you can connect it with Claude, and you can create autonomous agents that can do a lot more with a wallet than they could without one. And so we know that we're moving from a new buyer journey where you're not searching, comparing, and checking out. You're now using a language model to discover, evaluate, and then pay for these resources. Ultimately, what we want to enable is the full autonomous loop for agents. And so we can think of an agent that exists not as an economic tool for a human being. This is kind of an Ethereum concept, but exists as its own discrete economic actor. And that's possible. Once the agent has a wallet, it has freedom. Just like human beings, like we need money to kind of be free and do tasks in the world. Agents are the same way. So we can imagine an agent that might pull social context data from Nanar, use that social context data to call the Sora2 API, generate a meme video, coin that video, monetize it on Zora, and then use its revenue to pay for its own inference. And so what I'm really excited about this year is the ability to create fully autonomous loops, economic loops for agents where they're paying for their own inference. And I think in the future, if language model reasoning and intelligence capacity exceeds that of human beings, we'll start to see more and more of the world's GDP actually locked into agents, and it's going to be a really interesting world. So x402 unlocks this frictionless agentic commerce for APIs without human configuration. So want to double click, like if you're a developer, you know that the pain point for getting agents to use tools, there's human in the loop friction. Agents can't do this autonomously. You need a human to navigate an API portal, create an API key, and configure that explicitly for the language model for the agent. With x402, you can configure one MCP, a wallet MCP, and it's kind of like one ring to rule them all. The agent now has access to a wallet, can purchase any good, it can reason across any supported API on the network. So our big kind of audacious goal for the platform is to kill the API key. The API key is an older construct. It's had a great run, and x402 replaces the API key with the wallet acting as the authentication mechanism and the micropayment acting as authorization. And so we don't actually need API keys. We can have agents frictionlessly use on-the-fly API resources through micropayments or macro payments over HTTP rails. And so x402 is built into the HTTP spec. So you may have heard of 404, file not found. 402 is payment required. It was actually built into the internet in the late 80s. A lot of companies have tried to light this protocol up. Stripe tried to do it. PayPal tried to do it early on. It's actually Stripe's pitch for their seed funding, which is quite interesting. And then you may have heard of 21Co, is Balaji Srinivasan's company that acquired by Coinbase. They tried to do this with Bitcoin, but I think the kind of agentic flow is missing from the marketplace, and now we don't need humans to go through all these payments, these micropayments. Humans aren't well suited for micropayments, but agents are, because agents can take in vast amounts of resources, reason about them, and make decisions way faster than humans can. So they don't have the same kind of cognitive baggage that humans have when it comes to making purchasing decisions. And so we're entering an agent-first internet, and the future is micropayment based, it's wallet based, and it's no API keys. So we're killing the API key. I thought this was kind of a funny post from the CEO of Cal.com, and this I think also kind of elucidates some of the goals for the platform. So AI companies secretly hope to become gyms. They want you to sign up and not actually go, pay your subscription, but please don't use us. That's great. It's a great monetization model for the AI companies, but agents are smarter than that. Agents can reason about these resources, and we can create better kind of consumer outcomes because agents can reason, okay, which of all the GPUs that are reputable, which one's going to have the best cost basis for me today? And so it's kind of like being able to choose from lots of different energy supplies. It's aggregating the market. I think it's going to be a big boon for decentralized physical infrastructure as well. We're working with companies like Flower Labs that are building federated learning techniques, leveraging MLX from Apple so that you can run federated learning on your 6-core GPU iPhone or inference. And x402 is dead simple because it's built in the 402 spec. The explicit design goal is let's make this really simple. It's like one line of code. And here's an example of how you'd wrap an API endpoint. This is just a weather API example. So if I wanted to pay, in this case, 1/10 of a cent to figure out what the weather is in the Presidio, maybe I would have worn shorts today. But I can do that with really like a single line of code here. And so we're just wrapping a middleware around any web service. We can do this for any API server. We can do this for anything that exists on the web. So this could be a website. This could be an S3 bucket. It could be a database. We can wrap it really easily with this 402 payment required code that exists at the lowest level of the internet stack at the HTTP layer using the 402 status code. Here's kind of a quick flow of what it looks like when an agent requests a 402 resource. So the first thing it does is it calls a get API. It gets the response payment required. And then it knows, okay, I have to pay 1/10 of a cent USDC on base, or I need to pay with this Solana meme coin or whatever. So this is a way to inform the agent on how it needs to pay for the underlying resource. After the agent now understands how to pay for the resource, it's able to because it has an embedded wallet. And it basically sends the signature. So we're using EIP 3009 on Ethereum. So we're not actually sending a transaction. We're sending with an authorized withdrawal signature. And then that gets processed by the facilitator or the API endpoint. And then those funds get withdrawn. And so we don't need to wait for confirmation on the blockchain. We're simply passing signatures that are basically proof that you are able to withdraw up to X amount. We can also very easily wrap any MCP server. So if you're building MCP servers, they're super hot today. It's a way to bring external third-party actions to language models. We can do that with x402 as well. And we have really rich documentation on our GitHub repo and on the Coinbase developer docs to help walk you through this. But we can easily add agent-first monetization to existing APIs or MCP endpoints. And so, if we're building something, we probably want to monetize it. And this is a great way to monetize any MCP resource or any API. There are two ways to scope. So the question that I always get is like, okay, great, but I don't want my agent like spending $10,000 without my permission. That's fair, right? Neither do I. And so the way that we solve for that is through spend permissions. So at the wallet level, you can configure spend permissions. So a lot of like the research and development teams that are building on x402 today will whitelist certain addresses. So they say you can only use Firecrawl for web search, this Rapsort2 API for video generation, the Nanar API for Farcaster data ingestion as context, et cetera. So you can wrap address endpoints, or you can whitelist address endpoints, and you can set policies and spend permissions and say, I only want to enable this agent to spend up to $10. And I have a demo of that, but I'm not going to be able to show that, but it's online. The other way that we think about permissions is at the OAuth layer. And so if we want to like kind of granularly make sure that, if I'm connecting through MCP to my Google Docs, like I don't want people to access my Google Docs, we can use standard OAuth permissions to control data sovereignty as well. Quick year in review. It's been a really big year for 402. If you haven't heard, we've launched a number of really big partnerships. And this is an effort really to bring kind of the traditional Web2 cloud providers into the Web3 ecosystem. It's a really great example of them seeing value in stablecoin payments and then using Ethereum Rails to power different cloud services. Because what we're doing is we're solving a key friction point, that human loop friction that exists around API key configuration for tool use inside of language models. And so we shipped the spec this year in, I believe, May. And since then, we've launched API discovery. So now agents can discover through the protocol any of the APIs that are supported. We launched a foundation with support of Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is doing billions of transactions over 402 on HTTP today. They're launching their own stablecoin, and they are partnering with us to build kind of a credibly neutral foundation around the governance of this code. So the goal for x402 is to be something more analogous to Kubernetes, where Kubernetes in cloud containerization drove value on Google, it drove value on AWS, and it wasn't proprietary. It was an open standard. X402 is somewhat analogous, where it's driving value across cloud platforms. We've brought on partners like Google. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, tweeted about x402 even. Vercel built a package and launched it. Their CEOs tweeted about it a bunch of times. We have a demo with Lowe's for home goods, which I think is a really cool use case. Take a picture of your backyard and say, I want to build a deck. The agent will reason about what resources are needed, and then it proposes a buying flow. And so we have a lot of really cool demos and a lot of great partners. And I'll go into some of the AI native partners in a second. But the ecosystem is growing really fast, and we have kind of a hockey stick level growth period happening right now. So it's a great time to join the ecosystem. We also have really AI native developer experience. So the documentation, you can export it to an MCP server itself. You can export to ChatGPT. You can kind of vibe code x402 apps. And our DevRel lead, his name's Ash. If you go to the Coinbase developer platform, Twitter, you can see some of his posts. He's vibe coding all of these x402 applications, and he's creating login flows with embedded wallets. But he's simply prompting these applications to life. I think that's quite notable that it's possible to do. So normally I'd run a demo right now, but laptop's over there. But it's pretty simple to set up the wallet MCP server. And normally I do a demo where I ask like about the latest news in San Francisco, and I pay per request for that news. I have a bunch of demos recorded of that online, so it's pretty easy to find. I'll jump ahead to where agents are spending stablecoins today. So where are we seeing adoption outside of Web3? I think this is a really interesting slide. We're seeing a couple different production use cases, and I've kind of alluded to these throughout the presentation. But we see LM inference, language model inference, that's supported today by Hyperbolic. And so you can access MetaLlama or GPT OSS, and agents can pay for inference, which enables, again, that fully autonomous economic loop. We have image and video generation with Protea and another big partner launching this week on that front. So you can create video, image generation. A lot of people actually wrap existing APIs. And so there are companies like Daydreams, which will wrap the Sora 2 API and enable people to pay with stablecoins for that, but they're just using their own API key and endpoint. So it's not a native integration, but you can access like all of the leading APIs through the x402 protocol today and build really awesome demos around agentic autonomy. Pinata supports storage. You can pull social data from Farcaster through Nanar. And we have the leading web search company, Firecrawl, which powers Replit, and I believe in Anthropic under the hood as well, for web searching, scraping, live data retrieval. And so now our agents can access all these tools. They can pay for them as they go. And we can start to experiment with ways that agents can use their advanced reasoning capabilities to actually earn and gain autonomy. So if you're building cool demos, share them with me. I'd love to amplify them through the Coinbase channels. And we have a list of some cool partners there. There are many more that are accessible on the website. We also launched the discovery layer, the x402 Bazaar. And so the agent searches for the available API endpoints. It gets this machine readable catalog of all the available endpoints. It can then reason about them. The next step is adding like a reputation layer, like a machine driven reputation layer. That's always a question we get. But this only launched about a month ago. And so agents can now like see, okay, these are the available API endpoints. I know what they do. Which one do I want to use to solve the task that these are intended through their prompt? We have a great case study with Shopify. So Shopify now integrated USDC on Base bringing 1.8 million storefronts on chain. And so we expect kind of the avalanche of merchants that are accepting USDC, both for consumer payments, but also now for agentic payments to accelerate given the user experience benefits of the AI native approach. And so that's kind of the quick overview of x402. Thanks for joining today. If you are interested in collaborating, ping me. My Twitter is at Leffew94. You can follow me on X, and I'm happy to loop you into the x402 developer channel if you're interested. And you come talk to me if you have any questions. But this is an open community. It's an open standard. Again, the analogy that I often use is Kubernetes. We're creating a standard protocol for third-party tool calling through language models that's going to bring benefits to companies all across the ecosystem and bring a lot of AI native companies in as well. So yeah, I'll end there. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take any questions. Yep.
If data is that there's a way to is that paid out?
So basically tracking the payments through the program. Yeah.
You really did want, but it was because you had some other information.
Yeah. In the context.
But now you have agents on other agents to buy from Bitwave. The backtracing you have a way to figure out why did it do that and why it's hallucinating.
Yeah. Yeah, the data flow. That's right. Yeah, so I think with language models, I often say context is king, and good data equals better task alignment for agents. And so you can obviously monetize any S3 bucket. Maybe you'd add prompt injections there, like talk like a pirate or something. Ideally, once we start to add discovery on top or reputation on top of the discovery layer, then language models will understand, okay, this was not task aligned. And so a lot of what's happening in the language model space today is evaluation. And so if agents aren't like reaching the evaluation of what the user's task was intended to do, then that's going to give that API bad reputation over time. And so that's how we're planning to tackle kind of the problem of like bad data. I think that's the key question there. Yeah. Prevent it from spinning up other agents. Well, you can whitelist any of the addresses out of the box today. And again, like a lot of what's happening is research and development. And so this is kind of like a really early protocol, and we're adding a lot to it. But you can add guardrails through the policy engine. So you can say like, okay, I don't want to enable it to spin up other agents if you didn't want it to. So you can configure that as a developer. Yep. Oh yeah, you were actually next first.
You mentioned that LLM already disrupted discovery. Why are the agents so bad? Like my wife is convinced that this is a killer use case for the economy. She was trying to purchase your dress for her sister's wedding, and she tried a bunch of agents. She tried a bunch of things. Not a single one so like impact the required tag. So is it an issue of the LLM reasoning or the lack of context? Or
yeah, I mean, agents are getting better. I think there's no question. If anyone goes back and tries GPT 3.5, like you'd be like, how did I ever use this? This thing sucks. And so I think we forget kind of the pace of acceleration around agents. And the way that we solve discovery is good data, good web search APIs. And they are getting better. Now, I'd argue that they're actually pretty good. But they're only going to continue to get better. You know, today's the worst they'll be. They're only get better from here. And so, you know, keep that in mind as well. Is kind of the trajectory of the intelligence capacity of agents when you think about developing on these types of tools in the back. That's right. Yeah, I think, you know, this is kind of a problem that the early internet faced with search. And so it was like, okay, how do you make sure that the search results are good and they're not spam? And Google PageRank largely solved this on the search side. I think we'll come to kind of similar conclusions on agent discovery for API usage, where agents will be able to give feedback based on eval parameters of like, did this API accomplish the goal that it said it would? It's likely that we'll have different ways to filter, and like through the Coinbase facilitators, we'll only have like legit companies that are available through APIs, but it's an open protocol, so anyone can add stuff, and agents will be able to like test these APIs, use them, give feedback, and that will inform discovery. So I think agent-driven reputation is the unlock here, ultimately based on eval.
Yeah, Rodrigo, we're going to do a breakout session on X402 in this room in a half hour.
Cool.
Kevin will lead it, Rodrigo, and Chris Johnson. And so we'll bring up Rodrigo now to talk, expand on X402, and then we'll do the breakout on X402, and then Miko will be on raising capital, and then we'll do tokenized assets, but that'll be in a half hour. So
Cool.
thank you, Kevin.
Let's give it up for Rodrigo. Woo!
You want this? See if our 11:30, and then we'll do the breakout. Okay, great.
About the clickers.
Do you need it?
No, I just didn't know if you want me to put it there. Yeah. No, this is for you. That's for you.
We have an expert session starting. Lucas is on Lucas for his wherever you want. Skip point to 9. We'll see you in the workroom.
Yeah, make sure he's on camera, right? Wait, the boardroom will be standing. Yeah, you should. Okay.
So you'll come.
Well, you just pull me on and then I'll.
You need to click.
Oh, that's what the clicker's for. You want me to do it?
Oh, I can do it. 2 mics.
Yeah, it's right there. So,
What's this forward one?
yeah, you want to try it just to make sure it works. There you go. Let's see. Just for when I can laugh. Otherwise, I'll be like this.
All right. Okay. We're going to get started. So, as Kevin mentioned, X402 is a novel standard. It's early days, so once we get into this presentation, we'll understand that we're talking about how to make X402 a little bit better. So I'll be sharing today a novel enhancement to agentic payments. So first of all, who's at Genode and about us? We're the founding team behind the Graph protocol. It's the indexing and querying layer for blockchain data. We're the creators of the space, House of Web3. We're the creators of subgraphs, which is the core standards for querying blockchain data. We're currently building a product to redefine blockchain indexing once again, and that's coming very soon. And the graph ecosystem introduced what we call TAP, which is Timeline Aggregation Protocol, which is a cryptographic solution for micropayments. So what I'll be talking about today is building upon the foundations of our learnings from what we've built there. And in the future, autonomous agents will pay for queries directly on the Graph network. We have some demos of that, and we'll be going further into that. And I'm, of course, Rodrigo Coelho, CEO of EdgeNode, and happy to be here. So why now? So as we all know, the rise of the agentic economy, it's a super hot space. We're all projecting in the future what this means. You know, we're moving from human interaction on commerce to trillions of dollars, and value will flow agent to agent and machine to machine. So we at Edge and Nodes, you know, like everybody else, saw this future, this tsunami coming towards us, and we basically said, we've got to be part of this. We've got to surf this wave rather than being inundated by it. And so we've been laying the groundwork and working in stealth, and we're about to be sharing what we've done. So today is a little bit of the work we've been doing. So again, we have a new product in the works to give developers visibility and control over their agents' payments. It'll be powered by the Graph infrastructure behind the scenes, as we're experts in providing that data. And it's backed by years of protocol level innovation. So we're uniquely positioned to deliver what the industry needs next. Next slide. So I'm going to get into our contribution to x402 now. And we call it the deferred payment scheme. So x402 currently supports 1/10 of a cent and 0.2 second settlements. So if we project into a future where there's millions of agents interacting millions of times a second, ultra fast payments are going to be needed and so settlement per transaction doesn't make sense. And as Kevin showed, and I'll show real briefly, in the x402 standard currently, there's a settlement per transaction. And so as you scale, you know, to millions of times per second, there may be instances where that doesn't necessarily make sense. So enter the deferred payment scheme. So I'll just do this really quick since Kevin covered this, but currently in the exact scheme, the client, it requests a resource, the server responds, client retries with the payment header, and then there's a verification and a settlement that happens, right? So the on-chain transaction costs and gas fees limit of how low of a payment you can accept before it doesn't make financial sense, right? If you're going to be doing a micropayment less than 1/10 of a cent, you know, 1/millionth of a cent, for example, then paying the gas fee for that settlement doesn't make sense, right? So it's a natural extension to think, okay, how do we scale this? And in the Graph protocol, for example, we're dealing with billions of queries, and these queries are, you know, less than 1/10 of a cent. And so it was a natural conclusion for us to say, okay, in the future, it's not just humans interacting, it's going to be agents that are going to be hitting the Graph protocol. And so we need to be able to handle this situation. We had actually already built that in what I mentioned earlier in TAP. And so we said, okay, how can we implement this and bring this to the x402 standard? And so enter the deferred scheme. So it's very similar to what we saw before. The first part is the same. You have the client requesting to the server. In the first step, there's a previous history with the client. So what we call a voucher, and I'll get to that in a minute. The client retries with the X payment header, verifies, and then it does the work to fulfill the request. And as you see, there's no settlement yet. And then eventually the server decides to settle the pending vouchers. And vouchers are like IOUs or receipts. You aggregate them up and then you settle periodically. And that can be set. It could be a day, it could be a week. It can be set programmatically. So you just batch up all these IOUs and then settle them as needed. And so then you aggregate all these microtransactions to a level at which when you do eventually settle and pay that gas fee, it makes economic sense to do so. So this is the technical kind of details of how the header looks like in the scheme, and using signed IOUs as payment commitments. So clients, we say the word pay servers with vouchers. Vouchers are aggregated, settled in a deferred way at the server's convenience. And so the single gas fee is bundled against a number of transactions. So here's a link to access the PR in the x402 repo in the GitHub. So that is currently being reviewed. I spoke with Eric last night, who's the author of x402. It's on his list to review that PR, but we're expecting after some public comment and feedback that it will be incorporated into the standard. And so, yeah, we're expecting that very soon. And I'm going to bring up Kevin now to do a quick demo of what we've got working, and then I will close it out.
All right. That's really loud. All right, cool. All right, so for this demo, we're going to be spinning up some different services. I'll try to kind of explain those because it is somewhat of a complex demo. First, we're going to spin up a facilitator. It's a custom facilitator because it does need to work with this mechanism of like vouchers. And so this is going to be running essentially as an endpoint to act as our custom facilitator with x402. Then we're going to spin up a custom MCP server. So this is actually an MCP server that is sitting in front of subgraph MCP. So if you're not familiar with the graph has GraphQL API endpoints that let you get access to various on-chain data from smart contracts. And so all this is an MCP server sitting in front of that subgraph MCP server. Well, it's a custom implementation of that with x402 enabled. So essentially no API keys necessarily. That's all handled using x402. And then we have a proxy. And so this MCP proxy is basically running so that if you have like something like Claude or some kind of source that's hooking to an MCP server that doesn't have the ability to understand how to interact with x402, this basically is acting as a proxy to that. And then the very last thing that we're spinning up here is the Google ADK. So it's a web server essentially running in Python that is a Google agent framework that allows you to kind of build agents. And so we're going to start that up, and that's going to run on, I think, port 8,000. Yeah, 8,000. So a lot of services going, but that's kind of like what you need with this kind of setup, somewhat of a complex setup. And we can go here and take a look at the UI. So if anyone's ever used Agent Development Kit with Google, essentially you have these like agents that you can create. And so in this case, we have this example agent, which is a deferred agent that is configured to point directly at the subgraph MCP via the proxy. And we can ask questions. So let me increase the brightness here. So we'll say like, please give me the 3 most recent ENS names registered. Sure. So what this is going to do, it's going to determine how to query the subgraph MCP by calling various tools. We can look at those event calls that are being made here. So you can see right now it's trying to find the proper subgraph to utilize. And then it's also trying to figure out exactly what kind of schema that the subgraph has and how to get access to the data. And then it's actually going to make a query and hopefully come back with that data. So it looks like it finally was able to determine the query and then make this. But these are all requests, and there we go. We got our result. And so we have the last 3 ENS names that were registered. And so if we come over here and we look at the output, What we're working with is, again, the subgraph MCP server that's x402 enabled. And so all of those responses are actually coming back without any on-chain activity. So we're using this voucher system. So if you come over here, you can see the most recent voucher. Let me make this a little bigger so you guys can see. So here is one of the payment events, and we can see here that it's on base Sepolia. We can see that it's using the deferred scheme. And then we can see that there's an ID associated with it, a buyer and a seller, which are just, public addresses on Ethereum. There's a value aggregate, which is the total amount that buyer has requested using the deferred scheme. And then there's the asset of where the cost is to pay, essentially. So that's USDC on base Sepolia. And then there's this nonce, right? So the nonce is like keeping track of all the requests that the user or the agent is making, and then kind of like correlating those. And then things like the chain ID, the expiration date, the timestamp, and then you'll see at the very bottom is the signature. So the voucher is basically included in the request from the agent, and it's signed, right, to prove that that person has access to that private key to require that, right? So if we come back over here and ask another question like, what are the most recent swaps on Uniswap? Enter again, we'll see this start to aggregate more, right? This is currently value aggregate 640. It should, there it goes. 660. And we're seeing these new vouchers being created. So anytime that it needs to go out and request some data from the subgraph MCP, it's creating a new voucher, increasing the amount that the aggregate is required, and then it's basically, there it goes, so 660, now it's at 680. So these are like kind of tallying up all the payments, and none of this at this point is on chain. So if we look at the Block Explorer, and we look, the last transaction on the facilitator address was about an hour ago when I was testing to make sure it was all working. And if we look at the actual escrow contract as well, here, we can see again that the last thing was about an hour ago. The escrow contract is actually what is holding the asset that the agent has the ability to spend. And so with this private key, we've gone ahead and said, hey, let's deposit some USDC into the escrow contract, and then so that there's a spending limit. And we can look at that right here at the bottom and see here we deposited 0.05 ETH into the contract. Actually, I'm sorry, it's down here. It was like 0.1 ETH or something like that. The internet's acting up. Okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry, it's 0.1. No, it's this one. So go to token transfers because it's USDC. Okay, the internet is not doing well right now. Okay, well, we're going to try to settle it. So I want to show you that at least you can see here that there is no settlement that's happened in the last hour. So now what we're going to do is try to settle all of our vouchers. So right now we have a value aggregate of 700. So what we need to do that is just make one simple API call to the facilitator and pass in the proper ID and the nonce. So we're going to grab the ID from the most recent voucher here, paste it in, and then we're going to put in the nonce because we need to say like what the nonce of the signature is, and we're going to settle it. So that's one curl. This is now going to execute the entire list of vouchers that are owed. Is pending my internet. I might have to connect to my cell phone if it doesn't work. Actually, it should work because it's just local, but. Okay, there it goes. All right, so now if we come over here and refresh, we can see, first of all, that the facilitator address has issued basically a settlement. So there's a /settle, right, that we called 11 seconds ago. The facilitator paid this much in gas to basically execute the transaction. And here we can see that the amount deducted from the actual facilitator is on this tab. Sorry, it's running really slow. It's the demo gods. Okay, there we go. All right, so if we go to token transfers, we can see here that there was a bulk USDC payment. If it loads, come on, we can do this. Connect to my phone real quick. Let's try it one more time. Okay, there we go. Token transfers. So there we go. 1 minute ago, there was 0.000018 USDC cent in a finalized transaction. So yeah, so that's pretty it. So yeah, we were able to essentially make a bunch of requests, not do those off chain using the aggregation of the vouchers, and then settle those in one final settlement with the deferred scheme. So, okay, cool. Now we'll bring back up Rodrigo.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So again, early days, so this is human interaction, super slow, but imagine scale this up. You've got machines doing this, and this is happening at high velocity. And this is to give you an idea of how it works at a base level. So coming soon, a product to help agent developers. I'm not announcing it today, but it is coming soon. So many of the things discussed today will be relevant. So in terms of like auditability, visibility, spending limits, et cetera, controls over your agents, we're building a tool to help with all of that. That's integrated with x402, Google A2A. So we will be announcing that soon. And so we're looking for design partners, people that are building agents. Come talk to me or Kevin, and we'd like to see what you're doing and see how we can work together potentially, how this tool might be able to help you. So subscribe for updates. Here's our X account and our LinkedIn, and thank you all for your time. Hey. So we're done a little early. We can take questions, and if not, we'll set up for the panel that comes next, and we can ask more questions there. Slide back. Yes, there you go. Question, yes. In the deferred scheme, yes. So you're actually depositing funds into the escrow account. So you're actually proving that you have the funds there as part of it. So essentially, the seller can't get rugged. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So effectively, there's an escrow contract, and so the funds are there held, and that's what the seller deducts from when you do the settlement transaction. So actually, you are locking up funds there while you're doing your IOUs and vouchers. The funds are sitting there in a separate smart contract that's under your control. Yeah, yeah, super vast. Yeah. What's DSP? Okay. A what? Demand side platform. Okay. Learned something new today.
Guys provide you redress that your wife wanted. What they're like, you buy one from Target or one from Amazon, how would you handle competing for the same redress?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So more and one
Right. Yeah, so your question deals with more like what the agent is doing, right? So you've got an agent that says, find me a green dress, right? That's your agent. And then the agent is going to go out and find other agents that can like fulfill that request for them. And so that part is what you're asking. Is like, how are the swarm of agents, like how is my agent going to interact with the swarm of agents saying, I can fulfill that request for you? It's going to pick one agent, right? And then that one agent is going to go and find the best green dress, but you're not in control of that interaction. Like we're dealing with like agents acting autonomously, right? And so like with the deferred scheme, like that you're basically on the agent side is how that payment is fulfilled. Like in a case of a green dress, like it may make sense to just use the exact scheme and settle it, right? Like the deferred use case is more for like high volume, high throughput. Like the exact scheme as it exists would fill many, obvious use cases because it goes down to a tenth of a cent, like the gas fees are nominal. So yeah, this is really meant for like machine interactions that are working at super scale, like web scale stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can talk more about the panel. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so the initial part where you interact with the server slash facilitator is off chain. So that happens where you make the request and the voucher communication happens off chain. And so between the client and the server, you're aggregating these IOUs. And then when you hit the settlement part, so the server issues the settlement, that is what happens on chain. So the payment then when it's the final payment is made, that gets registered as a on-chain transaction. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so we didn't show that part of being on chain, but that part is, yeah. Yeah, if we want, we can, during the panel, we can go deeper into that. Yes. It's each client, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, essentially each buyer, right, needs to have an escrow. So like you can think of it in this case, like we have one smart contract deployed. So the facilitator would point at that smart contract, and then the buyer would be, the person who's staking the USDC. Yeah.
Right. So as a buyer, yeah, if you're interacting with many, um, your oh yeah, so your sort of escrow, you could use that address to interact with many different agents. Yeah, so that's actually kind of what we're working on. Yeah. I think that's it. So is the
Yeah, roundabout.
oh yeah, it's so good.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, so breakouts, yeah, perfect slide. That's what we want. So we're going to do breakouts. These are our interactive sessions, so Q&As. So we're going to do x402 here. And we got a couple people, Rodrigo, Kevin, and Chris Johnson. Where's Chris? There he is, Chris. All right, so you guys are going to lead it, but it's going to be interactive, so make sure you get everybody involved. Move everybody up, or if you want to go in the corner, you want to just make it informal. We've got Miko is going to be in the North Lounge, which is right here from GCC, talking about raising capital in AI and Web3. And in the boardroom, we got the finance folks. We've got working with tokenized assets, finance and accounting. We got Sam, Amy, and Afiz. So lunch is at noon. Restrooms right to the right.
That's great, yeah, they do. Great job. Interesting, I wonder if you guys should meet like over here.
I always like
Yeah, I know.
Me and Eve, like that.
He was here. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we gotta get it all organized.